I'm Amber. I spent my life being the good daughter, saving, helping, sacrificing, until the day I turned 30 and found out my parents had stolen everything. But they overlooked one thing: the house was in my name. They took my future. I took the house. The morning everything changed, on the morning of my 30th birthday, I made two discoveries. The first, my parents had emptied my savings account. Every single dollar gone. The second, I owned their house, not figuratively, not emotionally, legally. A buried mortgage agreement I'd signed at 18 had come back like a ghost, with one crucial clause they never read. The house was in my name. And suddenly, so was the power. But let me back up. You see, until that morning, I still believed in family, in unconditional love, in doing the right thing even when it hurt. I worked hard. I helped them when they struggled. I believed their excuses. I trusted, because that's what daughters do. But the moment I saw the empty bank account, the illusions shattered, and the version of me who had spent her whole life sacrificing for everyone else, she didn't die. She woke up. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever discovered something that changed everything overnight? And if this story already has you leaning in, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because what comes next is the price of trust and the rise of boundaries. The family who called it love growing up, I thought struggle was just another word for loyalty. We weren't poor, not in the technical sense. But my parents, Mark and Elaine, carried themselves like survivors of a financial war. Every dinner came with a side of guilt. Money doesn't grow on trees, my dad would say, even when there was food on the table and cable on the TV. My mom clipped coupons like it was an Olympic sport, sighing dramatically every time she handed one to the cashier. They framed their frugality as wisdom. We were learning resilience. What I was really learning was quiet compliance. By age 14, I had my first job, stocking shelves at a dusty corner store after school. I'd hand over my paycheck with a smile, and they'd nod, as if I'd passed some secret test of devotion. "This is how families work," Mom said once. "Everyone pitches in, everyone but them." Dad still managed to buy fishing gear every spring. Mom always had a new Sunday dress every few months. But when I asked for a textbook or shoes that actually fit, I got the lecture: "We're not made of money." So I adjusted. I worked more hours, studied harder, aced every exam, and told myself that one day my turn would come. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. And it came in the form of $93, and every cent saved dollar by dollar, meant for one thing: launching my financial planning firm, helping other women escape cycles like mine. But what they saw was a pile of money they believed they were entitled to, because family, to them, meant access, not respect. And that's when the line between love and control finally blurred. The transfer that changed everything, it happened at 20:14 a.m. I remember because I couldn't sleep. Too excited, too nervous. That morning, I was set to meet with a commercial real estate agent to finalize the lease on my first office. It wasn't big, but it was mine. I opened my laptop to go over my financial projections. Again, that's when I saw it. Balance 4th, 8:30.92. I blinked, closed the tab, reopened it, same. My hands turned cold. I refreshed the screen 3 more times before diving into the transaction log. One transfer, $93,000, gone. Sent to a joint account I vaguely recognized, one I used to deposit money into during college when my parents needed help with groceries or gas money for Ryan's soccer tournaments. But I hadn't used that account in years, and I hadn't made that transfer. I called the bank, waded through the robotic menu, entered my security code. The voice on the line was calm, too calm. "Yes, Ms. Harper. The transfer was initiated using your saved credentials. Since the recipient account is one previously associated with your profile, it doesn't qualify as unauthorized fraud." I didn't hear the rest, because I realized something terrifying. Someone had logged into my account using my credentials. Someone who'd been in my apartment recently. Someone who, just 5 days earlier, had said, "Hey, mind if I use your bathroom?" And who had come out smiling like nothing happened. My father, he had borrowed my laptop to check sports scores that afternoon. He knew where I stored my passwords. He didn't just take my money. He broke the unspoken rule every child clings to, that even if they screw up, even if they make mistakes, your parents are supposed to protect you, not pick your pocket while pretending to hug you. The worst part, they didn't even try to hide it. The confrontation nobody expected. I didn't drive to their house. I marched. 30 minutes of highway and back roads, but to me, it felt like a slow boil. Each mile turning disbelief into fury. Each red light feeding a growing, pulsing realization. They didn't just take the money. They never saw it as mine to begin with. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed it instantly. A new car, shiny, polished, red. Not the dented old SUV my mom always complained about. I walked to the front door. Didn't bother knocking. My hand turned the knob with purpose. Inside, soft jazz played from the kitchen speaker. Mom was arranging flowers in a glass vase like it was any other Sunday. Dad sat at the table, reading the paper, legs crossed like a man without a care in the world. Neither looked surprised to see me. "Morning," Dad said without looking up. "Coffee's fresh." I held up my phone, screen glowing. "You want to explain this?" He squinted, then nodded like he was just remembering. "Oh, that. We needed it. No apology, no shame, just that." I couldn't breathe. "You needed $93,000? That was my business fund. My life savings." Mom rolled her eyes. "What were you going to do? Buy yourself an office with gold windows?" "It was for my company, Mom. The one I've been planning for years. The one I've worked 3 jobs to build." Dad set his paper down, folded it with surgical precision. "Your brother needs help. He's been sick." That word hit me like a slap. Sick. Ryan hadn't said anything. In fact, last week he posted a photo from a ski trip. I stared at them, realizing something horrible. They were lying, and not just to protect themselves. They were manipulating me into guilt, using my brother's imaginary illness as leverage. That's when the storm broke inside me. "You didn't even ask," I said, my voice cracking. "You broke into my home. You used my laptop. You stole everything I worked for and told yourself it was love." Mom sighed. "You've always been dramatic. It's just money. Family helps family." "No," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "Family respects family." I backed away, phone still in my hand, rage still burning. They didn't chase me. They didn't even call my name. Because to them, I was overreacting. To them, I was a resource, not a daughter. But something inside me had already shifted. This wasn't the beginning of a fight. It was the end of an illusion. As I drove away from the house, my hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I was too stunned to cry. Because somewhere deep down, I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about every time I'd swallowed my pride. Every time I'd told myself, "They're just under pressure, they mean well, it's just how families are." But it wasn't. It was something darker, more insidious. They hadn't forgotten to ask me. They had chosen not to. Because asking would have acknowledged that the money was mine. Asking would have made it a favor. But stealing, that made it theirs. That rewrote the story. We took what already belonged to us. And that shift, from daughter to asset, was the real theft. That night, I was supposed to celebrate my birthday. Jessica had planned a quiet dinner at my favorite little restaurant. Rooftop view, soft music, a table for 2. Instead, I showed up to my parents' house again, invited this time for what they called a surprise celebration. And it was a surprise. When I walked in, the room was full of extended family. Uncle Rob, Aunt Sylvia, Cousin Megan, even my brother Ryan. All smiles, all here to celebrate me, and all completely oblivious. My parents stood in the center of the room, acting like they hadn't detonated a bomb just hours earlier. I wanted to scream, to shout across the table and pull the curtain down on their lies. But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I waited. I let them pass around cake. I let them toast to, or bright star, their words dripping with hypocrisy. I waited until everyone had settled in, until wine had loosened tongues and dimmed awareness. Then I stood up, lifted my glass, and shattered everything. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I think it's important that I do." My parents locked eyes across the room. A flicker of unease passed between them. "I want to thank Frank and Diane, my parents, for teaching me something invaluable this year." My voice stayed calm, measured. I was done performing pain. "They taught me that family isn't about shared blood or last names. It's about respect, trust, boundaries." The room had gone quiet. You could hear forks being set down. And when someone breaks that trust, especially deliberately, especially by stealing your life savings to buy a new car and designer handbags, it forces you to see the truth. Gasps. Heads turned. Eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Aunt Sylvia asked, already bracing for drama. "Ask them," I said, turning to my parents. "Ask them why $93,000 was taken from my account without my permission. Ask them why they lied and said it was for Ryan's health, when Ryan is perfectly fine." Ryan stood up, stunned. "Wait, what?" That was when the dam broke. Whispers erupted. Accusations flew. Ryan demanded answers. Aunt Sylvia started crying. My parents tried to salvage the story. It was a misunderstanding, a necessary emergency. They thought I'd want to help. But it didn't matter anymore. Because they hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen trust. And in front of everyone, that trust shattered into pieces no cake or card could ever glue back together. I left the house that night not with anger, but with something more dangerous clarity. They had betrayed me with ease, with calculation, and now I knew who they truly were. This wasn't just a family conflict, it was a reckoning. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind wouldn't stop working, clicking into place like a machine that had finally found the right gears. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking why they did it. I was asking what I was going to do about it. That shift, subtle but seismic, was the beginning of my power coming back to me. Lying on my couch, the city lights blinking faintly outside my window, I started tracing the memories backward. It wasn't just about the 88,000. That number was just the tip of a much older story. One I hadn't wanted to admit was being written all along. I thought back to being 16, handing over my first paycheck for the electric bill, and watching Dad come home the same week with a brand new fishing rod. Or the time I got a scholarship, and Mom said she needed to hold the money for tuition, but the textbooks never showed up. Somehow the money vanished, and every time I protested, I was called dramatic, ungrateful, selfish. They'd built a system so cleverly disguised as love that I didn't even realize I was being used. But now, sitting in that quiet apartment, the truth felt loud. They had never seen me as a daughter with dreams of her own, only as a safety net, a tool, an emergency fund in human form. And that's when something inside me hardened, not into bitterness, into resolve. If they wanted to treat me like a transaction, then fine. I'd respond with the professionalism of a financial analyst who had nothing left to lose. I walked to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a manila folder I hadn't touched in years, my old family file, full of documents I'd once thought important enough to keep, but too painful to revisit. I flipped through tax forms, school records, forgotten warranties, and then I saw it, the mortgage. The refinance paperwork I signed at 18, thinking I was just being a reference. But my name was right there, next to theirs. Not as a witness, as a co-borrower, and with that realization, a new door opened. Legally, I wasn't just someone they used. I was someone with power. The emotions that followed weren't clean or linear. One moment, I was furious, thinking of every manipulation I'd mistaken for parenting. The next, I was grieving, not just the stolen money, but the family I thought I had. I mourned the version of me who believed that love and exploitation couldn't exist in the same room. That if I was loyal enough, obedient enough, helpful enough, they'd finally stop taking. But that version of me was gone now. In her place stood a woman who had been betrayed, yes, but not broken. Who had been used, but not erased. And she had a plan. I started the next morning not with rage, but with a spreadsheet. It may sound cold, but when your heart has been crushed under the weight of betrayal, sometimes the only thing that keeps you upright is structure. So I did what I do best. I ran the numbers. The first step, understand the damage. I opened my banking portal and pulled every transaction from the past 6 months. I coded the outflows: groceries, rent, personal spending. Then came the red zone the day the 88,000 vanished. What followed was even more telling. A 32,000 wire to a dealership, a 7,500 transaction labeled, a light golf supplies, to 12,000 to Caribbean cruise lines, luxury handbags, treatments, high-end electronics. No mention of Ryan. No hospital bills, no insurance copays. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had splurged with it. Shamelessly. Step 2: confirm legal standing. I called Madison, a friend from college who now practiced real estate law. When I explained what I'd discovered, the mortgage, the co-signed documents, the missed payments, her voice changed. "This isn't just unethical," she said. "It's legally actionable. You may be entitled to more than repayment." She walked me through my rights. As a co-borrower, I had standing to request mortgage records, contact the bank, even initiate a sale under certain conditions. I asked her to review the original documents. She did. Then she said, flatly, "Amber, you own half the house, if not more." That night, I pulled out my journal, not the kind with affirmations or dreams. This was my planning book. I outlined phase 1: confrontation, but not with anger, with facts. Bank statements, legal documents, timeline of theft. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. I wanted to look them in the eyes and say, "I know what you did, and I know what I can do now." Because here's the truth about growing up in a house that twists love into guilty. You learn to second guess your instincts. To think setting boundaries is selfish. To believe that asking for respect is somehow disrespectful. But in reality, standing up for yourself isn't betrayal. It's the first act of self-trust. And that trust, once built, is unshakable. In next part, I'll tell you what happened the night I invited my parents over and laid out the evidence that could tear their lives apart. Stay with me. This is where the story turns. And this time, I'm the one holding the pen. They arrived 5 minutes early. Not because they were eager to apologize, no. That's not their style. They came early because they expected to control the narrative. My father wore that same smug confidence he always did when he taught me a lesson. Growing up, my mother brought dessert, chocolate cake, my favorite, as if that could erase $88,000 of betrayal. I had set the table, but not for food. 3 folders. Labeled neat. Folder 1: bank statements highlighted in yellow. Folder 2: post-theft transactions, every indulgent expense. Folder 3: mortgage documents. My name clearly printed as co-signer. They sat, joked about the traffic, smiled, until I spoke. "I want to show you something," I said, sliding the first folder across the table. My father opened it, frowned. "This is your bank records." "No," I said calmly. "These are your withdrawals from my business account." My mother shifted. "Amber, we told you. It was an emergency, Ryan." I opened folder 2. "No. Ryan is fine." I confirmed it with him. "He's lactose intolerant, not dying." Silence. Then I opened folder 3 and let it sit. My mother leaned forward. "What is this?" "This," I said slowly, "is the mortgage you tricked me into signing at 18. You said it was just a reference for the bank. But this signature, this makes me legally responsible. And as of 3 months ago, you've been defaulting." My father stiffened. "You went through our mail." "No. I accessed the lender portal. I have that right. I'm a joint borrower." He went pale. For the first time in my life, he was speechless. Let me pause here and tell you something I didn't expect to feel in that moment: grief. Yes, I was angry. Yes, I was prepared. But seeing their faces, not with guilt, but with inconvenience, broke something in me all over again. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they'd been caught. My mother's voice cracked the silence. You're seriously going to destroy this family over a misunderstanding? I laughed. A single bitter sound. Misunderstanding. You accessed my personal laptop, stole my credentials, lied about Ryan being sick, and spent my savings on cruises and golf clubs. This is extortion, my father snapped. What do you want? There it was. Not, how can we fix this? Not, we're sorry. Just, what do you want? I looked him in the eyes. I want my money back, and if we don't, he asked. I slid one more paper across the table. A legal notification. A's co-borrower. I've assumed primary contact for the mortgage. If repayment doesn't begin by the end of this month, I will initiate foreclosure. My mother gasped. You'd leave us homeless. You already made me dreamless. They left in a fury of slammed doors and shouted guilt. But I didn't cry, not that night. Instead, I washed the dishes, wiped the table, and went to bed with a strange new feeling. Power. It didn't come from threatening them. It came from finally seeing the truth, clearly, without illusion. The next morning, my phone lit up like Times Square. Messages. Missed calls. A voicemail from Aunt Brenda, who hadn't spoken to me in months, telling me I was breaking your mother's heart. Texts from Uncle Joe about how money comes and goes, but family is forever. They hadn't heard the truth, of course. Just the edited version. I was the ungrateful daughter threatening to take her poor parents' home over. A small misunderstanding. But I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I let the silence speak for me. And in that silence, something amazing happened. My brother Ryan knocked on my door. He looked exhausted, like someone who had just realized the foundation beneath his childhood memories had always been made of sand. I had to see it for myself, he said. I let him in. We sat in the kitchen, no cake this time, just the folders. The evidence, the truth. Ryan read through every page slowly, carefully. They used me, he whispered. They used my name to steal from you. He looked up at me with something I hadn't seen on my parents' faces, genuine remorse. I didn't know. Amber, I swear, I believe you. He sat back, rubbed his face with his hands. They told me you were selfish, that you refused to help when Mom needed surgery. They said it was you who needed surgery. Oh, he said, blinking. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's when the cracks really started to show, not just in the story they told, but in the myth we'd been raised on. Over the next few days, I began to reclaim more than just my money. I reclaimed the narrative. Jessica, my best friend, who'd known something was off for a while, helped me write a simple document, a timeline with facts, evidence, and receipts. We sent it only to those who reached out. Not to beg for validation, but to tell the truth. Some relatives doubled down. Aunt Brenda said I was airing dirty laundry. Uncle Joe said I'd regret this when my parents were gone. But others, quietly, privately, reached out and said, I believe you. They did something similar to me. You're brave. It wasn't about taking sides. It was about breaking patterns. Meanwhile, my parents remained silent. No repayment, no apology, just a void where trust used to be. I gave it 1 week. Then I called Madison, the real estate attorney. It's time, I told her. She prepared the paperwork. A formal notice of intent to initiate foreclosure. We sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. It wasn't a bluff, it was a line. That night I sat alone on my balcony sipping tea, watching the city lights blur in the distance. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about every time I was told to shrink, to give, to bend for the sake of family. It was about every time I sacrificed my dreams so someone else could waste theirs. And it was about finally saying, no more. Everything shifts again. Because sometimes when you stand your ground, even the ones who try to bury you start to dig themselves out. We're not at the end yet. We're just at the part where choices come due. It was a Tuesday evening, quiet, unassuming, the kind of night that usually slips by without memory. I had just returned from a client meeting, tossed my keys into the bowl near the door, and kicked off my shoes when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me I should. Hello, silence, then a breath, then his voice. Amber, it's me. My father. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It was like hearing a ghost. We got the letter, he continued. About the foreclosure. There was no anger in his voice, no pleading either. Just exhaustion. I said nothing. We're not good with this stuff, he added, as if that explained everything. Money, boundaries. We weren't raised that way. I nearly laughed. Raised that way? What way? To steal from your own child, he continued. Your mother's selling her jewelry. I'm talking to a guy about the car. We'll pay you back. It'll take time, but we'll do it. For the first time in weeks, I felt my breath hitch. Not in fear, not in rage, but in confusion. Was this remorse? Or just fear of consequences? I need it in writing, I said flatly. A legal agreement, scheduled repayments, full transparency. There was a pause. You don't trust us. No, I said. I don't. Another pause. Then, fair, he agreed. Not with warmth, but with resignation. I didn't thank him. I didn't comfort him, and for once I didn't feel guilty about that. The next day Madison drafted the contract, the $88,000 to be repaid in full, $3,000 per month. First payment due within 7 days. If they defaulted, even once, I had the legal right to proceed with the foreclosure without further negotiation. They signed. Their signatures were stiff, reluctant. No apology came with them. No letter, no card, just ink on paper, but it was something, a beginning or an ending, maybe both. That evening, Ryan called. They told the family you're blackmailing them, he said. But I set the record straight. Did they believe you? Some did. Others said you should have just let it go. It's just money. I let out a dry laugh. It's never just money. Yeah, he said softly. It's power. It's respect. It's truth. He paused. And I'm proud of you, Amber. Those 5 words healed more than they should have. Maybe because they came from the only person in my family who'd ever really seen me. As the first repayment landed in my account, I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I opened my laptop, poured myself a cup of coffee, and got back to work. Because that $3,000 wasn't just money either. It was fuel. Fuel for the fire I was building, for the new life I was claiming, and for the final act of this story, the one where I rebuild not just a business, but myself. People think inheritance is about money, a house, a ring, a dusty photo album passed down through generations. But what if the only thing you inherit is trauma? What if all they leave you is a blueprint for how not to live? That's what I was unpacking, bit by bit, day by day. The money started arriving like clockwork. $3,000 each month, electronically transferred with clinical precision, no notes, no apology, just transaction numbers, silent currency replacing years of noise. At first, I watched the transfers like a hawk, half expecting them to stop, half hoping they might come with a message, some sign of remorse. They didn't. Instead, the money came, and I used every penny to build what they never believed I could. Reynolds' financial independence wasn't just a business anymore. It was a mission, a protest, a promise. My first few clients were women, smart, driven, and scared. Scared because their husbands controlled every dollar. Scared because their parents made them feel guilty for every financial boundary. Scared because someone they loved had weaponized money against them. I knew that fear. I had lived it. So when they spoke, I didn't just nod. I'd understood. I didn't see them as liabilities. I saw them as versions of me waiting to rise. Meanwhile, I was still processing what I had been through. The betrayal, the silence that followed, the family dinners I no longer attended, the group texts I'd been quietly removed from, the birthdays that came and went without a call. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But pain, I learned, doesn't always mean something is broken. Sometimes it means you've finally stopped pretending. Ryan came by often, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to sit in silence. He never tried to fix it. He just showed up. And that, in its own way, became a different kind of inheritance too, the kind you choose. One night, over takeout, he said, "You know they think you're cold, that you cut them off for money." I nodded. "I know, but I know better. You didn't cut them off. You just stopped bleeding for them." That sentence landed like a thunderclap because it was true. I hadn't changed. I had just stopped hemorrhaging for people who saw my worth only in dollars. The more I worked with clients, the clearer it became what I'd experienced wasn't unique. A woman in her 40s whose father emptied her college fund for a business that failed. A young man whose partner drained their shared account and called it love. A single mom whose parents' guilt tripped her into paying their rent while she skipped meals. Different stories, same pattern. Financial manipulation wrapped in emotional language. And so I began giving workshops, speaking at community centers, writing guides. I used my voice where I had once used silence, because silence had cost me enough. I didn't know it yet, but the business was about to pivot into something bigger. It started with a client named Tara, and her story, that changed everything. Tara arrived late for her appointment. She looked small, though not in size. Something about her posture, like the world had been weighing on her shoulders, so long she'd forgotten how to stand tall. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I almost didn't come. I thought you might judge me." I smiled gently. "You're here. That's all that matters." She opened her worn purse, pulling out papers, bills, letters, credit reports, spilled across the table like fragments of a broken life. "I left him 3 weeks ago," she said. "He maxed out every card in my name. I didn't even know about some of them. I have 3 kids. I don't know how to start over." I recognized the look in her eyes. Not just fear, not just shame, but that quiet, invisible grief when you realize the person you trusted most was never truly on your side. I'd seen it before. In the mirror. Helping Tara wasn't just about spreadsheets or debt snowballs. It was about giving her back something she hadn't touched in years. Agency. We called the creditors. We created a plan. We built her a new bank account with only her name on it. Small steps, but every one made her a little taller. And then, something unexpected happened. As I guided her, piece by piece, I began stitching something inside myself too. The parts of me still bleeding from my own betrayal, they began to harden, not into bitterness, but into strength. 6 months later, Tara walked into my office with a gift, a tiny succulent in a terracotta pot. "I kept it alive," she said, almost laughing. "First time I've done that. Thought I'd give you one too." On the little white tag was her handwriting. "You helped me grow." Thank you. That was the moment I realized. This business wasn't built on financial strategy. It was built on liberation. Reynolds' financial independence grew quickly, not because of advertising, but because people told people. She gets it. She doesn't just fix numbers. She understands pain. And as the stories came in, so did the healing. Not just for them. For me, for every time I'd been dismissed. Every time I was told family came first, unless I needed help. Every time my dreams were called selfish, while others used me as their safety net. Helping others didn't erase what had happened to me. It transformed it. It gave it meaning. But there was one thing left unresolved. My parents still owed me $11,000. I had stopped expecting apologies, stopped looking for change. But then, on the anniversary of the day they took everything, I got a notification. Final payment received. Attached was a single line. Would like to talk. If you're willing. I stared at it for a long time. Fingers hovering over my keyboard. What do you say to people who broke your trust, but returned your money? Was this closure, or just another beginning? And now, I truly want to hear from you. If you were standing in my shoes, would you answer that message from the people who hurt you? Would you open the door to reconciliation, or protect your peace and let the past stay closed? Have you ever had to choose between forgiveness and self-respect? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Let's talk about boundaries, healing, and the real cost of rebuilding trust. And if this story made you pause, even for a moment, or reminded you of your own journey, please share it with someone who might need to hear these words. You never know who's silently going through the same storm. Hit that like button if this resonated, and subscribe to Telling Story with Me, where every story holds a truth, and every truth can be a turning point. Because sometimes the most powerful kind of freedom is the one that starts when we finally say, "This ends with me." You are stronger than you think, and you are never alone.